Morning, Willow class. Today we are going to have a look at describing and extending number sequences. So when we extend number sequences, quite often we have to fill in the gaps and then extend them ourselves. But what do we mean by describing the actual sequence? Well, if you remember, we talk about the rule, okay? So we talk about what is the rule? Are we timesing by something? Are we adding something and then multiplying by something? You would need to tell me what the rule for each of these is, okay? So not only are we extending today, but we're moving on and we're actually describing these sequences. So the first sequence you can see, I've got 3, 12, 18, Now this is quite a simple one because we might recognise from the number that we've started with what this actually is. If we don't recognise that though, we know that we can actually look at the amount of jumps. So 1, 2, 3. So there are 3 jumps that we have made and we've gone from 3 to 12, okay? So if we've gone from 3 to 12, what is the difference there between 3 and between 12? And we know that the difference is 9. So the difference between this and this is 9, okay? So what I need to do then is split 9 between the 3 jumps, okay? Remember, it's the jumps, not the actual missing numbers. So what's 9 divided by 3? Well, I know that 9 divided by 3 is 3. So therefore, I wonder if each of these have gone up 3. 3 add 3 is 6. Add another 3 is 9. Add another 3. Yeah, it works here, is 12. But let's just double check. Add another 3, 15. Good. Add another 3 is 18, and so on. So can you quickly pause the video and then tell me what is the rule that we have done? Okay, off you go. So I've just finished the sequence and hopefully you guys have, and you've realised that we have added 3, and that is quite simply the rule. The rule is to add 3 to the number before, okay? And if you remember, we called the number before n. So the rule is n plus 3. So it's 6 plus 3 is 9. Then n, which is the number, plus 3 is 12, okay? So let's have a look at this one now, because this starts really low and there's only a few jumps and then it gets really high. So I wonder what we are doing here. If we're doing something where we've got big jumps like this, little jumps that go up in large numbers, large quantities, then we must be doing something quite big. Because it's not consecutive as well, it's not staying like 2, like 5, 8, 11 and so on. Because it's not staying low, we must be doing multiplication, okay? So if we are multiplying here, what could we be multiplying by to get from 2 to 8 with a number in between, okay? So we could do the jumps, but the jumps here only help us if we're actually calculating, if we're adding or subtracting. Now that we're actually timesing, we need to think about what could we be timesing by to get here. So I always do a bit of trial and error. So for example, let's start by timesing by 5. Well, 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 5 would be 50, not 8. So it can't be that, so it must be less than that. So let's then try 3. 2 times by 3 would give me 6, so you would have 6 here. 6 times by 3 would give me 18. And that's 8, not 18. So 18 is bigger, so it must be less than timesing by 3. So what's less than timesing by 3? Timesing by 2. Let's try. 2 times by 2 gives me 4. 4 times by 2 gives me 8. That's working. So I could go and write in my rule here. However, I'm going to wait. I'm going to check that this is correct first before I then do this. 8 times by 2 is 16. 16 times by 2, or double 16, just double check if that's 32. Yeah, it is, well done. And then double 32 gives me 64. Super. So I've got 64 and then double 64. Double 60 is 120. Double 4 is 8. So it's 128. So my rule is you multiply by 2 as you go up. So that's good news. Okay, let's move on and just have a little look at this, because you'll see this is slightly different. You'll have some like this with addition, some with multiplication, some even with division. But now I've got, as you can see here, fractions. So I've got a half, then 1, 1.5. So we've done this in class. We've counted up here, so we can see, we know what this is. If you don't, it's going up evenly each time. A half, 1 whole, 1.5. If you need to draw it to help you, then draw it if it's fractions. So a half starts off like this, 1 whole. Then we've got 1.5, which is like this. Then we've got, what must be next? Add another half, 2 wholes. Good. What comes after 2 wholes? 2.5. Okay, I'd like you guys to finish this sequence for me. Off you go. Okay, so hopefully you've now completed the sequence. I've completed it just by going up in halves. I've actually moved on and I've given you a bit of a challenge question for this. What will be the 16th number in the sequence? So this is the first number, this is the second number, this is the third, and so on. So I could do that. However, if I do that, I'm going to take a long time. So what could I do that would be quicker? Is there any pattern that I could do? Because we know that it's going up in a half. So if it's going up in a half, I could multiply the number that it is in the sequence by a half. So well done if you figured that out. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4. This number is 4th in the sequence. If I do 4 times by a half, or 4 lots of a half, that gives me 2 wholes. Let's try it further up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is the 10th number in the sequence. 10 times a half, or 10 lots of a half, is 5. So I could do 16 multiplied by a half, and it will give me that number in the sequence. Can you work that out for me? Okay, so well done if you've worked out what 16 times a half is. Just to remind you, sometimes it's difficult when you picture it like this. So you know that a half is 0.5. So if you were doing a written calculation for this, if you couldn't visualise it, then we could do 16 times 0.5. And the answer would actually be 8. So what will be the 16th number in the sequence? The answer is 8. Okay, finally, well, not finally, we've got another bit to go through, but just before we move on, I've got another sequence. So 5, 4 3/4, 4 2/4. You can see that the denominator is a quarter. Therefore, 3, 2, what's the next one going to be? 1. So it's going to be 1/4, and then how many whole numbers? Well, we know, obviously, 4 whole numbers. Then we get to 4 wholes. If we've got 4 wholes and I'm subtracting a quarter, then I'm left with what? Can you please fill in the next 2 gaps and tell me what the rule is? Okay, off you go. Okay, so I filled in those answers, 3 3/4 and 3 2/4. Now, I'm just going to do a little visual picture here to show you how I have worked this out. So if I have got the 4 quarters here, I'll just change my pen so you can see. If I have got 4 wholes, sorry, we're actually working with quarters. So I've split my 4 wholes into quarters, okay? So I've got all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, which is 4 wholes, 16 quarters, okay? If I then get rid of one of these, because I'm taking away, my rule, as we said, was taking away 1/4. So if I'm taking away that 1/4, then what I am doing is getting rid of one of these. So I am just going to get rid of one. Hopefully this works. Okay, so I've got rid of one of those quarters that I had. So now when we come back to count how many we've got, I've got one hole here, two holes, three holes, and now I've got 1, 2, 3/4 left over. So that's why I've got the 3 holes and 3/4. If I was to take away another quarter, exactly the same, I would get rid of 1/4. So I've still got my 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, but now I've just got 1, 2/4. So 3 holes and 2/4. Okay. So let's just have a quick look at a question for you that you might have. So Sally writes down this number sequence 0.9, 1.2, 1.5, 1.8 and 2.1. She says that the 8th number will be a whole number and then every 10th number after that will be a whole number. So I want you to tell me, is Sally correct? Yes or no, and then I want you to prove it, okay? First of all, we know that she's going up in what? 0.9, 1.2, 1.5. What has she gone up with there? From the 1.2 to 1.5. The 1 hasn't changed. The 2's changed to a 5. So she's gone up from 2/10 to 5/10. So we can count 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10. She's gone up 0.3. So she's added 0.3 to each of these. Let's just double check that she's added 0.3 here and here. Has she? 1.5 add 0.3. Good, it does give me 1.8 and so on. So what's the 8th number in the sequence? Well, this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to add another 0.3, which will give me the 6th number, another 0.3, which will give me the 7th number, and then another 0.3, which will give me the 8th number. So 0.3 for the 6th number will give me 2.4. For the 7th number, I will get 2.7, well done. And for the 8th number, what will I end up with? Remember, it's not 2.10 because that would just be 2.1. So if I'm adding 3/10 to my 7/10, that gives me 10/10. And when we did this yesterday in our adding 0.1, that's a whole, isn't it? So now I've got one more whole and added onto these 2. So I've actually got 3.0. Okay, so the 8th number will be a whole number. Yeah, 3.0 is a whole number because there's no decimals. And every 10th number after that will be a whole number. Can you guys, for me, have a go working that out before you move on? And again, like we did yesterday, send it, take a picture of this before you work so we can see. Okay, this is just developing our reasoning skills. Good luck, everybody, with your learning today.